Ambulance sections were staffed and supplied for the Army. Nurses were recruited. Hospitals were organized. A wounded man's chances for recovery, for survival, depend in large measure on how soon he reaches the hospital surgeons. Begun in January 1941 at the request of the Army and Navy, the Red Cross blood program expanded enormously after Pearl Harbor. Blood donations rose to 100,000 each week, saving an incalculable number of servicemen's lives. The Army medic, with his bottle of life-saving blood or serum, became a battlefield symbol.
Five, even 10 soldiers one day who have been killed. The economy's been impacted widely. Yet, despite all of that, there's an unbelievable sense of solidarity. The soldiers with whom I've met, on behalf of the Genesis 123 Foundation, we've been giving out Army jackets like you see on the back of my chair here to keep soldiers warm in the winter. And the soldiers are motivated, and their families are very, very supportive. And we as a country are unusually united in the face of this war.
And we're certainly hearing a lot about that here in the U.S. So now moving to what's happening right here in the U.S., Jonathan Tobin, are you surprised by the increasing support for the pro-Palestinian movements right here, especially as we're seeing from ongoing protests around the country as well as from some elected officials?
Well, I think the calculations of Hamas were wrong in some respects. They thought Israel would not respond the way it has. They thought they could get away with it, and they were wrong about that. But they were right in one respect. They thought the spectacle of the greatest mass slaughter of Jews, the largest mass slaughter of Jews since the Holocaust, would set off, instead of a backlash against them and their cause, that it would generate a wave of anti-Semitism around the world. And they were right. I think the genesis of this wave of anti-Semitism is not so much a genuine concern for the Palestinians as it's a function of ideology. So much of American culture and politics has been taken over by the woke catechism of diversity, equity, and inclusion, DEI, and critical race theory, intersectionality, which falsely analogizes the Palestinian war against Israel to the struggle for civil rights in the United States. So I think a generation of young Americans has been indoctrinated in the toxic and false idea that Israel is a white oppressor of Palestinian people of color. This is a big lie. The war, the conflict between Jews and Arabs is not racial. Jews and Arabs are the same race. The majority of Israeli Jews are themselves people of color by the definitions of the American left, because they trace their origins to the Middle East and North Africa. So this is completely false, as is the idea that Israel is indiscriminately killing Palestinian civilians, when in fact it is doing everything that it can to avoid doing that, as Hamas hides behind them. So I think there's a false premise, there's an ideology driving it, and it's quite frankly not surprising that the natural result of DEI, which some of us have been saying for years, granted a permission slip to anti-Semitism, has resulted in just that, when in fact the civilized world should be behind the victim of the October 7th atrocities, not the perpetrator.
Like you mentioned, the war itself has sparked many debates domestically about ideologies. That quote, far-right Hamas found common cause in hating Jews. What do you mean?
Yes, exactly that. The rise in anti-Semitism, we've seen it on the far left with the rise of DEI ideology on university campuses. But we've also seen a rise of anti-Semitism as it relates to the fringes of the far right in white nationalist circles, white supremacist circles. My colleague, Dr. Liram Koblet-Stencer from the Reichman University based in Israel, we wrote that op-ed in the Jerusalem Post, highlighting how in alternative platforms such as Gab and 4chan, there's been a rise in anti-Semitism, quoting Hitler in such kind ways and in a positive light. And on a surface level, that may seem surprising, but as we've seen in November, Israeli President Isaac Herzog showed to the BBC a copy of Mein Kampf by Adolf Hitler that was found on the body of Hamas terrorist in northern Gaza. So this is a connection that's been going as far back as the inception of Palestinian identity itself, with Haj Amin al-Husseini going to Nazi Germany to try and persuade Adolf Hitler to extend his genocide to the Jews of the Middle East. So this rise in anti-Semitism. We've been seeing it across the spectrum from the left, but also on the right, and it shows that whether it's socialism, communism, or Nazism, they're two sides of the same coin.
Jonathan Tobin, do you agree with that?
No, I think that's certainly true to some extent. The anti-Semitism has always existed on the far right as on the far left. But the problem now is not a few, random extremists posting on, channels or parts of the internet. The problem is the mobs on the streets of American cities, blocking traffic, disrupting Christmas celebrations, mobs on college campuses, intimidating Jewish students, all chanting for the destruction of Israel and the genocide of its population. These are phenomenon of the left. This phenomenon, unlike the far right, which has virtually no influence, on Capitol Hill or in American politics, the anti-Israel left, the DEI intersectional left, has enormous influence within our political system. It is exerting tremendous pressure on President Biden and his administration to back away from Israel. That is why the administration spends so much time talking out of both sides of its mouth about the war, because it's afraid of its own left wing, which it needs. Biden needs, his left wing to have any hope of beating former President Trump next November.
So, Jonathan Feldstein, yes,
support.
Exactly. A lot of attention right now on
the far left of their party. They lose one state like Michigan, and President Biden becomes ex-President Biden again. And I think we're going to see unfortunate pressure and trends going in that direction simply because of American politics.
Definitely, with 2024 coming up, a lot to watch for. We're going to take a break right now, and when we return, we'll dive deeper into the latest situation of the war with the news from Israel. We'll be right back.
One of the biggest areas that's been hit in the economy is the agriculture, because tens of thousands of foreign workers who were working in the agriculture industry fled. And so we're seeing tremendous numbers of Israelis showing up to volunteer to pick lemons and grapefruits and persimmons. And my youngest son was picking lettuce this week with his pre-army educational program. People are stepping up because, barring this, fruit and vegetables are going to rot on the vines, and that impacts our prices. The economy, the trickle down, is something that we're going to be feeling here for probably most of 2024.
And now switching gears to the larger region in the Middle East, Jonathan Tobin, the Houthis have been ramping up attacks on not only Israel but also on U.S. forces in the Middle East. Especially this week, we saw that happening again. While the White House says that it's considering redesignating the Houthis as a terrorist organization, has not done so yet. What do you think is going to take them to do it? And also, how do we actually deter other forces, such as the Houthis, from getting further involved?
Well, there's a certain irony here. The Biden administration came into office determined to end the war against the Houthis that the Saudis were fighting with U.S. assistance. The Houthis are an Iranian proxy, and they were causing a lot of trouble, but they were sort of on their heels because of the Saudi counterattack against them. But because the Biden administration came in with this idea that, number one, it wanted to go back to the Obama-era appeasement of Iran, which meant going easy on the Houthis, and it also took a very dim view of the Saudis as an unworthy ally of the United States. So what happened is that the Houthis were strengthened. They're back and forth, and they're now more dangerous than ever. So it's not surprising they're now attacking Americans. They're now attacking shipping in the Persian Gulf and in a very strategic area of the world in terms of communications. And it's time for this administration to get serious about defending, forget about Israel for a minute, defending American interests in the region, an interest that Biden has acknowledged. But because of his foolish policy towards Iran, he has put himself in a position where he has to now choose between backtracking, which he doesn't want to do, and escalating to the point where he puts himself in danger of getting into an open conflict. Now, nobody wants a war in the Persian Gulf or a war with Iran, but the point is, because of the perceived weakness, and it's no longer really a perceived weakness.
You're just giving it away.
Of appeasement, and now we're reaping the whirlwind in the form of this Houthi terrorism, which poses a threat to the entire West.
I want to go back to Mr. Feldstein right here. You were talking about the economic impact felt by everyday Israelis right now in the country. And of course, a war will bring more struggles to the people in that country. And speaking of U.S. involvement here, as the conflicts in the Middle East kind of escalate, do you think Israeli people would like to see more U.S. involvement? Or do you think it's better if the war does not get spread even further?
I actually take a kind of radical position on this. I think that ultimately the war is going to spread, and whether it's U.S. involvement, which should be involved, because as Jonathan Tobin just said correctly, U.S. policies have emboldened the Iranians and all of their proxies around the world, including Hamas, what we saw just under 3 months ago. I think that the time has come that we no longer have the luxury to even think about kicking the can down the road. I spoke with many soldiers on the front line in the north this week who were talking about the necessity to go into Lebanon to take out the threat, because remember, they have 150,000 precision missiles that can take me out through the window behind me, and if they want to, and I suppose if I keep talking like this, maybe I'll be a target, but I'm fine with that. We need to take out the Houthis. We need to stop them. We need to show the Iranians that they can't play this game anymore. We need to take out everything we can in Lebanon, and we need to, if necessary, take it directly to Tehran and show that the Islamic regime there cannot continue to fund and threaten not just Israel but the world. I hope the Saudis will get involved. I hope the Egyptians will get involved. I hope other sane actors in the world will get involved. But the question ultimately is, are we going to see actual involvement, or are we going to see more appeasement and running away like we saw the U.S. do in Afghanistan not that long ago?
So we're talking about U.S. national security and interest right here. And Bradley, I want to ask you about the economic impact even further. So some major shipping companies, as we have seen, are forced to reroute or even cancel part of their operations in the Red Sea due to the ongoing attacks in that region. What are the larger economic ramifications of that? Right?
Unresponded to. And it really is the wider game with regard to Iran, whether it is Hamas in Gaza, Hezbollah in Lebanon, the Houthis in Yemen. It is to cause chaos, as much chaos as possible, to penetrate what they term as the myth of Israeli invulnerability. They believe that by giving Israel a bloody nose, they will essentially rally the Muslim world to its banner and by extension rule over the Muslim world. And
yes, Israel definitely the target right now in the center of the Middle East, the center of all the tensions right here. So last, before we have to wrap up here, I want to go back to Jonathan Feldstein. So why is a decisive victory so important for Israel at this moment, and really for all of you? Why is it so important for the free world?
Well, it's a critical issue because, as I said, we can't kick the can down the road as we've been doing with Hamas and Gaza. We need to show part of this operation. Many people discussed that it was a retaliation. It's not a retaliation. It's a restoration of deterrence, and we need to make it very clear that whether it's the Houthis who have raised their hand, or Hezbollah, and certainly the Iranians or anyone else who wants to get involved, that it won't be tolerated. And that's a message, and that goes to your question as to why it's impactful for the rest of the world. Unfortunately, we're the canary in the coal mine. The slaughter took place here. It was mostly Israeli citizens. A war with Hezbollah is going to target us in a brutal way, but we have to take those wars, and we have to win those wars handily, because this can no longer be pushed off. And as Bradley said, ultimately the head of the snake is in Tehran, and whether it's cutting that head off physically or making them fear that will happen, if they actually have that fear, I don't know. We don't have the option. This is not an optional war. It is a critical survival for Jews, for Christians, and for the West.
And Bradley.
Well, I think that's obviously right. The stakes are very high for the West in this war. It is a grave mistake for people in the West to think that they can appease Iran, or that allowing Hamas to survive, which is for Israelis a non-starter, but which is exactly what much of the world is demonstrating for. That's not going to help peace. It will just actually put off peace even longer. I think America has a choice here whether it's going to face up to its responsibilities, not so much in terms of what actions it will take against Iran, but will you realize that a policy of seeking a rapprochement with Iran and distancing itself from the Saudis and from Israel, that's a grave mistake. That's the fundamental mistake that Biden made when he entered office, and that set the stage for October 7th. That policy has to be thrown out. That is why October 7th has to change everything.
Let's see what White House will do next. Lastly, Bradley, 30 seconds.
Absolutely. Israel needs a decisive victory, first and foremost, to seek justice for the victims of this horrific attack, but also to send a much bigger message in that the future of the Middle East does not lie with the mullahs in Tehran, but the future lies in peace, prosperity, good relations that were represented through the Abraham Accords. We've already seen that with good relations between Israel, Bahrain, the United Arab Emirates, Morocco, Sudan. We were about to see a peace agreement between Israel and Saudi Arabia. This future, this bright future, is a threat to what Iran stands for and what the Islamic Revolution is seeking. So this is why Israel must have a decisive victory against Hamas in Gaza.
Thank you, Bradley. And that concludes our discussion today. Thank you to all of our guests, Jonathan Tobin, Bradley Martin, and Jonathan Feldstein. When we return, we'll speak with Dr. Tamir Rotman, a clinical psychologist working with the survivors of the October 7th attack.
The highest art is beautiful, breathtaking, timeless, and moving. Experience art with 5,000 years of history, inspired by the divine. Experience you.
American Medicine Today, featuring cutting-edge medical and science innovators and a medical professional's insight on political and social issues plaguing our nation and healthcare. American Medicine Today, Saturdays 6 and Sundays at 9 on NTD Television and other streaming platforms.
Do you feel the bills getting higher and higher every time you check out at the supermarket? Do you feel your monthly discretionary money has decreased, although your income increases yearly? Inflation is eating away at your wealth. Digital wallets and central bank digital currencies are destroying financial privatization. Only gold and silver are constitutional forms of money. Our privacy was to be protected against unlawful search and seizure. Midas Gold Group will help you take control of your finances and protect your wealth and your privacy. Pulling money out of the corrupt banking and investment system is a way to privatize your finances as the elite push us towards digital wallets and central bank digital currency. Protect your wealth with real money. Deal with the best. Midas Gold Group, a proud America First company. MidasGoldGroup.com.
Stay tuned to get 2 rolls of alien tape free. You wouldn't stick your mother-in-law on the wall, but you could with alien tape. It just sticks. Just peel and stick to make anything stay in place quick. Brick, papers, marble, tile, plastic, even leather. Nothing works better than alien tape. You wouldn't stick your fishbowl on a moving car, but you could with alien tape. The secret is nano-stick technology that grabs and locks on to secure one side of the surface to the other. Alien tape secures in seconds, then twist, pull, and rinse to reuse. Call or go online to get your first roll of alien tape for just $19.99, plus shipping and processing. But to make this deal really stick, we'll give you 2 more rolls absolutely free. You get 3 rolls of alien tape for one low price. Order now.
To order, call 1-800-490-1364 or go to tryalientape.com. So call 1-800-490-1364 or order online at tryalientape.com.
My graduation was something I will never forget. People like you and me sometimes may have doubts in themselves, but I feel that everything's possible.
Find free adult education classes near you at finishyourdiploma.org.
Welcome back to International Reporters Roundtable. I'm your host, Iris Tao. For the remaining of this program, I'll be speaking with Dr. Tamir Rahman, director of the Free Spirit Experience in Israel, a treatment program for at-risk youth. Tamir and staff have repurposed their community to help rehabilitate the survivors of the Nova Music Festival attack on October 7th. Tamir, welcome.
Thank you very much, and thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for joining us. So first, tell us about the work that you've been doing. What are you seeing and hearing from the survivors?
Well, we've been doing that from like the week immediately following the attacks, and throughout now it's 2.5 months later, roughly, and we've heard very, I guess, disturbing stories, very visual descriptions of the things that people have gone through, but I guess the emotional end of it, and also the distress is shifting. The people we're helping right now, for example, it's a little more kind of like under the surface versus the first couple of weeks. It was kind of like very, very much like ready to burst, and the experiences and everything, they were very vivid.
So tell us about some of the things that you heard from them about what happened. You talked about how it's mainly survivors of the music festival. I assume it's mostly young people. What did they see, and what are they trying to heal from?
Absolutely. So it is mostly people in their 20s, mostly, and we talk trauma. So we talk about, first of all, the kind of like the response, the fight, flight, freeze responses, and people really connect with that and tell their stories through that. So from this guy who's been literally playing dead for 6 hours while his pockets are being searched and checking that he's dead, and bodies around him being shot, and that's one story, versus other people who have ran and kind of like heard the shots behind them and ran for about 36 kilometers, which is I think around 20 miles straight, no water, and kind of like trying to get to a safer location, not looking behind, and people who normally won't consider themselves being in shape is kind of like that's also that's the flight part of the fight or flight response. People who have been locked into like shelters and containers, and people around them shot or just made it out. Like obviously we're talking with survivors, so people that whatever decisions they were making or people were making for them worked for them. But a lot of guilt and a lot of really visual memories of those who didn't make it, or those who they had to run over, or to get away from, or it, like driving the cars and seeing, like one person described, like buckets of blood on the road, and then cars being shot at, and everything. So it's been pretty horrid. And there are some, like day and age, people also have some documentation on their phones that they're taking, and also there's a really interesting video that's combining the Israelis' phone videos versus the Palestinians' phone videos, and you see everything parallel. One end, kind of like, yeah, it's very disturbing, and it's very kind of really meeting the core of cruelty, the core of violence.
And that's very